Good morning, monsters, and welcome to another episode of Monsters on the Edge. I am your host, Barnaby, and I have an amazing guest who is full of information. And we started this a couple weeks ago with Chitan Noir was on my show, and she was talking about asexual reproduction in reptiles and the possibility of cryptids being able to reproduce with very small populations. So today we have a very special guest. Dan is joining us, and he is a herpetologist and a Bigfoot researcher and wears so many hats as well. And I can't wait to get into it with him. And he's going to tell you all about this stuff and asexual reproduction and regeneration in these creatures. And we're going to get right into that in a little bit. But first, guys, I want to remind everybody about what we got. So, welcome to Monsters on the Edge. If you guys are not already watching Caps, we are on YouTube. You can find us at Wisconsin Caps on YouTube and check us all out there. And we also have a show streaming exclusively on Paraflix, Paranormal Plus, on the Trail of Undiscovered Beasts. Season 1 is out now, and you can check that out. It is all about Bigfoot in Wisconsin. Season 2 is coming this fall, and it will cover Bigfoot and other creatures from all over the U.S. If you want to show your support for Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society and all the things that I do and my team does, you can show it and wear it and display it. Head on over to wisconsincaps.com. Click on Shop Our Store. There you can get t-shirts, hoodies, sweatshirts, magnets, stickers, mugs, tote bags, tank tops, pillows, and more. You can slap our logo on everything you got. While you're online, make sure you head on over to all of our social media platforms. We're available on Patreon, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube at Wisconsin Caps and WI Caps on Instagram. You can find all those links at wisconsincaps.com. Coming up this weekend is the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention, June 10th. And we have all kinds of cool stuff for you there. Angela Zabel will be doing a psychic gallery reading. Christopher Noel, who I had on the show a couple weeks ago, will be talking about Bigfoot and spiritualism and the connection there. Chad Lewis will be discussing legends and lore of Upper Michigan and Upper Wisconsin lumberjacks and all that such. And the CAPS team, including myself, are going to be doing a presentation on all of the paranormal activities and research that we did of Menominee, Wisconsin. So that's coming up this Saturday in Marinette, Wisconsin. And then, guys, next Sunday, Jack Chavez, who will be on the show next week, is hosting the Chicago Paranormal Convention, June 17th, and that is down in Chicago, Countryside, Illinois. Going to be a great show. Chris Fleming is going to be there. Chad Lewis is going to be there. Myself, and there's a bunch of other speakers as well. Jack will tell you all about that next week right here on Monsters on the Edge. And then, guys, we are going to be at the Michigan Paracon coming up in August. Sault Ste. Marie. We'll tell you more about that as it gets closer. And the Great Lakes Paranormal Conference in Glen Beulah, Wisconsin, September 22nd through the 24th. Myself and a lot of other great speakers will be at that event as well. Look at that, Lyle Blackburn and Jason Hawes, Adam Berry, all kinds of cool people. Chad Lewis, Dayette Renee, Christina Bloom, Shane Pittman, Jeff Belanger, all kinds of cool guys and gals. And then, guys, Lexington, Kentucky, we head down to for Cryptid Con in November. And that's what we got so far. I have a library talk in Kenosha in October. I still haven't got the promotional stuff for that as well, but that's coming up, and I will make sure that we share that when I get that. And guys, I don't know when I'm supposed to play these things. So we have brand new little clips and promos and stuff. So before we get into this, just so that I'm covered and my producers and stuff are happy, I guess I'm going to show this clip. Guys, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, Chitan Noir was on my show a couple weeks ago, and she was talking about asexual reproduction. And if you don't know what that is, we're going to get really into that. Don't worry, this show is all about reptiles and amphibians, so hopefully it doesn't offend anybody or your kids or anything like that. So let's have some fun and let's get into it. My guest, Dan Nedrelo. How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
How about
awesome. So tell us, for people who don't know who you are, I know I had you on my other show a while ago, but let's get a little bit of background about yourself and what you do, and we can get into this.
Well, I started out in third grade deciding that I wanted to be a photographer and a world traveler and chase animals. That meant zookeeper. I was motivated by Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom with Jim and Marlon Perkins. And interestingly enough, I got to work with Jim a couple times later on in my adult life when I was working for Wisconsin DNR and running a lot of my presentations. One thing led to another, and I somehow got interested in dinosaurs like most children, but I didn't stop there. And all the books kept suggesting that reptiles were the closest animals available regarding relationships to dinosaurs. So, not knowing about birds now being the current trend of belief on that, I started studying reptiles, and I found them fascinating, colorful, and extremely interesting. Not very scary at all. And one thing led to another before I had rattlesnakes and boa constrictors and things like that. And they were so cool. And if they're neat at 7 feet, they must really be cool at 12. So one thing led to another, and I ended up with a reticulated python, which we actually have a photograph of later on. And she made it to 17 feet and about 140 pounds. And I would take her to kindergarten classes and let the kids work with her. And she was like a giant fire hose and very easy to pick up and very nice to work with. So fortunately, she had a very good temperament and was afraid of live rabbits. So that worked out very, very nice. Was able to travel a little bit. I was always interested in the Sasquatch thing. That started probably about 7th grade. Interest 5th, first experience 7th. And of course, you can't talk to adults about these things. So I went on to college and tried to talk to people that I thought were reasonable, but they couldn't talk about it either because nobody believed it. And now you're stranded, so it's you and the literature. And eventually I went online and found other people, and here we are. So as far as travel, most of the United States, Australia, Tasmania, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and I'm embarking on a new job right now that will hopefully put me all over the country. So
wow, that's absolutely amazing, man. I know that you guys, we've had you on before to talk about Bigfoot on my other show, and I'm sure I'll have you back to talk again. But today we are going to focus on a completely different topic, as I said. So, Dan, we got all kinds of pictures. We got your wealth of knowledge. We were talking before the show about all this stuff. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to learn right along with everybody else. You tell me what you got to tell me and what we're going to learn and what pictures you want up, and we'll show is yours,
okay,
man.
Well, without further ado, let's just go to the first picture and we'll keep this controversial and intriguing. How's that?
Awesome. Here we go.
All right. Whoa, you can't do things like this. This is dangerous. This is ridiculous. You can't. What kind of a responsible adult would ever do? Well, I would. Why? I think more people are killed by horses than all the collected different kinds of wildlife that we could put together. And horses are wonderful. We walk right up to them and pet them and ride them and sometimes get kicked by them and sometimes lose our life falling off them. Alligators at this point are several million or more in Florida, and they do hurt people sometimes. Not typically, but people have been killed and drowned by alligators. We do have to be careful. Are they intelligent? Far more than most people think. Are they reptiles? Officially, they are. Future taxonomy might even change that. What's the definition of a reptile? Well, compared to the young lady who's warm-blooded, they're supposedly cold-blooded. Yet, they are extending their range north to the point where they're sticking their nose out of ice to survive and continuing to go north. And of course, they were in the pet trade and still are in some cases, and so people dump them everywhere. So they're in any state could have an alligator in it. just because people get tired of them and let them go, which is a very bad policy. They're poikilothermic or ectothermic. Ecto means outside, thermic means warm. So they get their heat from the outside temperatures. And that's true with reptiles and amphibians. You can throw amphibians in the refrigerator, bring them out and feed them, and put them back in the refrigerator. No harm done. With reptiles, they all have a critic temperature. Some of them very low. And like a garter snake or a bull snake could actually eat at temperatures way below recommended temperatures, like 75. We've had bull snakes eat at temperatures as low as 40, which is insane. I don't even think it's in the literature, but yet we do have things that we're still learning about them. Is she in danger? Actually not. This gator was extremely gentle, very desensitized. 99% of the time, we made sure we had a rubber band around its snout, so there was 100% safety. She handles really well, and the gator as well. So, and the actual damage, her eyes are protected there. The actual damage that it could do is fairly potential with sharp teeth, sharp baby teeth, but the actual damage itself, pretty minor. So it would, when you're bitten by things and there's blood, there's usually an associated social reaction to that. And there we have it. Do alligators reproduce asexually? No. How about the other crocodilians, the caiman, the gavials, the crocodiles like the dwarfs from Africa, or the saltwater or Siamese or Cuban or Morelettes or the Americans? No. They don't. They reproduce with a mate. Okay. How about reptiles? Internal, external fertilization. Internal. They do have sexual organs. Snakes and lizards have a pair, and they're appropriately called hemipenises. So it is internal fertilization. Amphibians, different story. It's external, like fish. So we'd have milt, or we'd have spermatophores from the salamanders, and does it take two? No. We're finding out more and more that lizards, salamanders, frogs, toads can reproduce asexually. We'll get more into that. So what are some of the differences between amphibians and reptiles? Next. Well, reptiles have scales. And they pick up a lot of sensitivity through chemotaxis, which is a study of, or basically it's touching and tasting chemicals with the tongue. So it's an olfactory session. Snakes don't see very well. Lizards do. And so lizards will hunt down things with their eyes. Snakes, not so much. It's more of a chemical trail. So when somebody's afraid because the snake is chasing them, chances are the snake's freaked out and it's heading for cover, and you happen to be standing where the cover is. It doesn't even know you're there. Big lizard like a Komodo dragon, different story. You're probably lunch. Komodo dragons can reproduce asexually. So can teaids, which are members of the family Teidae, which we see here. Tegu lizard. And what's going on with that? Well, we know that in an all-female population, if they all laid eggs, there'd be higher, quicker, faster repopulation happening because there's less energy expended to lay those eggs, because you don't have to expose yourself to potential predators by going and trying to hunt down a mate, which you may or may not be successful at doing. You may or may not expose yourself to predators because of where you choose to mate. And in addition to that, how about the energy expelled during that? Now, if you're an egg-laying female that doesn't have to do all those things, right away energy is conserved, and you might even be able to lay more eggs. So with one female and she lays 2 eggs, 2 females every time she's cloning, now you've got twice as many, and now expand that. It just continues on and on and on. Different species have different levels of reproduction. Some of our upper northern climate animals, since these are ectothermic or hence cold-blooded, they, like rattlesnakes, for example, it takes a lot of energy to build up the resources in the body to be able to give birth or have young. and the correct term for that would be ovoviviparous. And what's going on is it takes so much energy out of the snake that it may take 2, 4, even 6 years before they're able to reproduce again. If the population was all female, well, there'd be more individuals laying more eggs all the time. Is parthenogenesis a possibility for snakes? It is. And it's interesting because they have sperm detention, and so they may be able to mate, say, 7 years ago and still lay fertile eggs from it. So there's still a lot we don't know. And in zoo situations where the animals have been kept solitude, we've had Komodo dragons in Europe actually give birth or lay eggs that hatched into viable individuals. They don't seem to have a high percentage that are viable, but there are some. So that's really interesting and very intriguing. Is it captivity that triggers that? Or is this actually happening in the wild? With the dragons, I'm not sure. But with numerous other lizards, there are. There's classic studies of that in southwestern deserts of the United States with a Neo-Mexican whiptail race runner. I'm not going to try to pronounce the new genus. The taxonomy is crazy. Let's go next. Snake or lizard. This is actually one of Wisconsin's rarest reptiles. They're locally abundant in certain places. That means that there's a lot of them in certain places. Limiting factors for these creatures are Christmas tree farming, potato farming, agriculture, spraying, because they're insect eaters. These are lizards. They're legless lizards, but they have ear openings, external ears, which snakes don't have. And I know a lot of our listeners aren't particularly familiar with reptiles, perhaps, but I will say that we don't have aggressive reptiles in Wisconsin. We have nervous ones that will bite if you get too close, but our rattlesnakes aren't going to chase you. Our snapping turtles aren't going to chase you. And down south, our water moccasins really aren't going to chase you, but there'll be tons of people that say otherwise, and they will say, you weren't there. How do you know? So, well, after doing it with water moccasins for 20 some years in probably 20 states, I kind of have a pretty good idea how they behave. And it's interesting because a lot of the problem with them is they'll sit up in the trees basking or sitting in the sun, get scared when a boat comes underneath, try to hit the water, not seeing well, they don't know you're there, pow, land in your boat. And of course, if they land in your boat, they're after you. No, they're not. But friends were just discussing this on my reptile and amphibian group. By the way, I'll plug that. It's Reptiles and Amphibians in North America, ID and Natural History. If you'd like to learn more, come and join us. Here we have an animal that hatches out of an egg that takes about 60 days to hatch. That's typical with reptiles, even sea turtles. But it might be as early as 45 degrees, partially because of the sunshine and the temperatures, both the surrounding soil temperatures, which might be mud, sand, dirt, under a log, under rocks. The drier it is, the more likely the eggs will dry up and won't retain enough moisture. But in many cases, we get surprised, and after a rain, they do survive. So what's up with the temperatures? That actually can determine the sex of the animal, if we're talking about turtles or crocodilians. So that's kind of interesting also. And different species have different temperature ranges. Medium temperatures, more of a split between male and female. Extreme temperatures, more male or more female. And it's best to read up on that specifically, depending upon what animal you're interested in, to learn more. Okay. I should mention that reptile eggs are leathery or almost hard like a bird. And they look usually white, creamy white. Bad eggs will look bad. They'll turn brown or yellowish and usually dry up after the embryo, or there's maybe no embryo at all after the contents of the egg yolk just kind of spoils. Here we have an eastern milk snake. Reptiles are thick-skinned, leathery, dry, shiny, look wet. If you look at your fingernail, you'll notice that reflects the light. It feels like plastic. That's what a snake feels like. But they do have different textures in their skin. When I started studying lizards, there were about 3,000 species. Now there are over 4,000. I'm not sure exactly, like 4,269 or something like that. Just quite a few more. And we're continuously discovering new species regularly. Of course, we're waiting for those cryptids, though. And that may well be next. After talking with Adam Davies about what he was learning while in Africa, and knowing that some of our scientists at UW-Madison have an interest in this, and I won't give the details on that, but I'll just say that you'd be surprised how many people are taking a lot of these reports seriously. Well, of course, Barnaby, you wouldn't be surprised, but the other interesting thing here between reptiles and amphibians is the regeneration, although lizards can regenerate their tails. Salamanders are amazing. We'll talk about them in a little bit. I will say that snakes do not regenerate. Turtles generally do not regenerate. They will just heal over. But they can, it seems like they can really regenerate their shell. I've seen some horrific injuries, and the turtles are just fine. But you'd never think that they would survive some of the beatings they take on the highway when vehicles run over them, And of course, unfortunately, some people like to do that on a regular basis and target them to apparently get a kick out of the crunch they make on the highway. And please do be careful out there, because we are in turtle breeding season now, and they are protected in so many states. We'd like to have them for the future. So it takes them a long time to grow up and reproduce. Next. Salamander eggs. There's little salamanders in those see-through jelly-like eggs. These are plethodontids. That means that they're members of the plethodon genus or similar, which means they are lungless. They breathe through their skin and absorb water that way. These animals are four-toed salamanders, and were photographed in Wisconsin and under moss. And the way the female lays the eggs is right over the wetland area. So when the juveniles hatch, they can plop right into the water. And of course, they have gills and go through metamorphosis, another difference between amphibians and reptiles. Do salamanders utilize parthenogenesis? Yes, they do. How about hybridogenesis? Yes. Am I pronouncing this right? I'm not sure. I'm not a cytologist. But I will say there's even another one called kleptogenesis. And that's basically where we're seeing certain types of salamanders, notably the line with tremblays, silvery and blue spotteds, actually what appears to be interbreeding, but they're not contributing genetic material. And what some of these animals will do is they target five total species and interact amongst one another, and they may go ahead and pick up the spermatophores or the sperm packets of these other species, notably the tiger, the mole salamander, Talpoidium, and also the blue spotted, but tremblays. And they will interact, you'd think hybridize, but there's no onslaught of genetic material utilized. It just motivates the internal organs of the egg producing system of the animal to reproduce. So there's no genetic material contributed. And that's parthenogenesis. Do I totally understand it? No, not at all. Do I get an idea of what's going on? Apparently, some environmental pressures may contribute to this. Captivity, being kept alone, may contribute to this. What's the list of creatures that have done this, that are vertebrates? It's getting longer as we learn and discover more. And we've even known domestic turkeys to be able to clone now. or use parthenogenesis. So it's pretty crazy, quickly changing our views and ideas on this, and exactly what's going on, I certainly don't know precisely, but it's in the literature, and there's a lot to read. So I would suggest people head for that if that's what really interests you, because it isn't going to stop. We're only going to find out more and more animals that are doing it, specifically with the lizards. There are some captive creatures that are doing this as well, and some new. Some of the geckos, which, by the way, represent the smallest lizards in the world, some as small as less than 1.5 inches in length. It's interesting that the largest one, the Komodo dragon, has also got the capability to do this. Just the body change of metamorphosis, and meta, by the way, meaning change, morph meaning shape, and oh, sis, she can't hear me unless she's listening. She's in Florida. Anyway, interestingly enough, this body change with the amphibians, frogs, toads, salamanders, and caecilians, these creatures, most of them utilize it. There are a few species that don't, one being the redback salamander. And I believe there's a few frogs that are pretty crazy when they hatch. But most of them have a tadpole or larva stage. And look at the body change that's going on there. So talk about regeneration. And who can regenerate? With salamanders, let's go to the next one. Here's our blue-spotted laterale. This one is the one that interacts with the silvery and the tremblei. And tremblei are like a hybrid species, but it's interesting because some of these populations are all female. But if you look at this creature, what's interesting is most of us know that if he loses his tail, he'll regenerate it. Okay. If he loses his toe, they can regenerate it. Foot, regenerate it. He loses his leg, regenerate it. Loses his head, nope, he's dead. Okay, so you're looking at an animal that has an incredible capability. I'm just going to read kind of a defined description of what we have here. Basically, hybridogenesis is found in hybrids of different species like our tremblei, which looks a lot like the blue-spotted, and it's selective transmission of one of the parental genomes where the other is renewed by mating with the corresponding species. Well, okay, a lot of big words. What does it mean exactly? Very minimal amount of genetic exchange. In other words, we're getting females that basically give birth to females. Pricking the egg, actually even manually in the lab, can be done to cause the eggs to develop. And so that may be some of the instigation where they actually cloned the lamb, or, that's a very controversial situation as well. You can go next. Here's the tiger. And this also is an ambystoma or a mole salamander. They're underground a lot. And of course, moisture has a lot to do with this. But some of these amphibians can be found farther north up into Canada. And I was just checking the range of the blue-spotted. There aren't any in Ohio. So anything that looks like a blue-spotted in Ohio is a Jefferson salamander or something similar to it. And it could be that silvery, or it could be the tremblei. And a lot of this is really difficult too, because in taxonomical terms, it's an onslaught of change. So once you learn one Latin name, the next thing you know, it's changed, or they've moved things around. So the study of genetics right now is just amazing, and it just constant changes. So what good are these creatures? Shockingly important, because there's so many predators that eat them. Their distribution is wide. Their populations are large in number. And so you wouldn't even think that parthenogenesis is something that they have to have. Where's the focus? Well, it seems to be especially notable in animals in captivity, which probably reflects some of them in areas where there's very low populations, and that could be what actually triggers this. Many researchers have stated they can just imagine a Komodo dragon landing on a new island, no other dragons around, and this thing is just starting to clone itself through that system. Next. Notice no scales on the amphibians. Here we have an example of a leopard frog. Leopard frogs are one of the ones that are known to also lay fertile eggs. And there are some comparative species in Europe, actually Asia, Caucasus, the Asian area that some of the snowmen have been found. Caucasus, I believe, is how it's pronounced. But anyway, there's been some frogs from there. And so this is an ongoing situation with regard to what is exactly happening and why. And of course, with different researchers, there's different interpretations. The actual studies are just showing us that these things continue, certain species continually do it. And frogs aren't, shall we say, there's not as many frogs being noted as doing it as salamanders and lizards. So it seems to be salamanders and lizards that are the forerunners of this. We do have some snakes as well, including the giant anaconda, which, by the way, isn't necessarily so giant because the largest ones seem to be 17 feet or less. So the 30-footers that we're looking for, we're having a hard time finding 20-footers. Who did have the largest giant anaconda in captivity? Michael Jackson, which is interesting. You would have the resources to try to find the biggest. So that's kind of interesting. By the way, there's all kinds of different color morphs, variations and patterns of a lot of these creatures. So genetics is pretty amazing. The creature that we're looking at here can be brown. It can be green. It can have no spots whatsoever, or it can have unusual patterns. So it can make identification very difficult, especially when you're looking at pickerel frogs, which are also similar, same genus. And we think we know, but it's funny because the deeper we research, the more we realize we don't know. So what's next? Next. Thank you. This is a albino or amelanistic wood frog. And this species has an incredible capability of working with the cold. So this one ranges the farthest north of any of our frog species. And they have about a 3-week window that they come out and they call blast. And it sounds like basically kind of a cluck, 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 quack, quack, quack. And if you had a room full of people and one half the room went with one sound and the other went with the other, and you combined it, you'd have a pretty good idea what they sound like. So they sound like waterfowl almost. Normally a brown animal with a black mask, but can be tan, orange, red. Reptiles and amphibians have a tendency to be reddish or blondish or darker. So I always laughed and called it blondes, brunettes, and redheads. But anyway, it's interesting from the standpoint of you get individual variation like that with everything from rat snakes and rattlesnakes to wood frogs and toads and different types of lizards. Very interesting. So some comments on the condition. Albinism is not geared. That's not something that's the nature gears for. So as a result, it being a recessive gene, it's not one that you would think would show very often. But reptiles and amphibians sometimes have a very hidden nature. And so many of them can get away with this color morph. this situation. The problem is a lot of albinos are recessive and don't have a dominant body structure to allow for body function. So there can be internal problems, just a generally weaker animal. And so nature doesn't usually strive for that. But there are populations of albinos around, and we see that in everything from squirrels to different birds show up. And there are corn snakes in Florida that are pure white. Most of them are just missing the black, which is amelanistic, and then there are some missing the red, so they're melanistic. So that's interesting. Next. And we've mentioned some snakes have parthenogenesis, but they can't regenerate. Interestingly enough, this is a water moccasin. You'll notice the keels and the scales. You'll notice this one's a little hard to see, but the pit and the pit viper is between the eye and the nostril, and you're going to see usually a bigger, blunt, heavy head on these things. Aggressive? No. Nervous? Very. Not seeing very well. They'll often just use their camouflage. When they do get nervous, they'll drop their bottom jaw and they'll tilt their head back, and you've got a trap jaw or a cotton mouth. And that's where they get their name. So exactly how long can some of these animals have viable sperm and hold it? I have heard as long as 15 years, and it may well exceed that. We used to think that the older snakes would make it to 30, 40 years. We've had ball pythons survive and make 54, 56 years and still lay viable eggs. So we still are learning about this. A friend of mine's got a pine snake that's 40 some years old, and that's laying viable eggs still. So I think their capability to survive is rather amazing. And they have capabilities we haven't really even discovered or become familiar with yet. So how does this apply to, I know I haven't spent a lot of time with some of the cryptids except for the Sasquatch, and I do know there are things. Max Hawthorne would be a great person to talk to about that too. Some of the fellows that are and gals that are working with some of the marine giants, and just it's remarkable to think about the possibilities of them being able to survive situations and regenerate, or being so few in number that they only mate so many times in their lifetime, and it may be 5 and 10 years apart. So, or it might be they don't have to mate at all and they do reproduce alone. A lot of questions. So, as far as the venomous snakes go, our review in North America, we're looking at water moccasins and copperheads, both of the same genus, Echistrodon. Then we're looking at rattlesnakes, and there's 2 different varieties of those, or 2 different genera. The ground rattlers, which include the pygmies and the Massasauga. And then you've got the big typical rattlers like timbers, diamondbacks. Going west, run into more like prairies, and Arizona and California have tremendous numbers. And the largest heavy-duty populations are prairies in North Dakota and Canada and South Dakota. And interestingly enough, that's where some of the largest snake populations in America lie. Red-sided garter snakes in the Manitoba snake pits, which is interesting. It's also fun to note that so many of these different animals have different concentration areas where they're most abundant. For salamanders, it's the Appalachian Mountains. And it's interesting because you have a different species on each side of the mountain. So what's going on genetically is still being studied. And who knows how many more different kinds of reproduction we may find in the future for known animals, let alone, the theories that come out with some of the other cryptids. Next. Okay, even anacondas. This is a reticulated python. This one's not very big. It's probably like 11 feet. It's a nervous snake by nature, and a Southeast Asian variety, and easily bred in captivity. David Shealy has one that's 24 feet long, which is really fantastic. I would like to see that at some point. The biggest one I've raised up is 17 feet. But some of these snakes, the boas and the pythons, and anacondas are boas, by the way, they're live bearers. The pythons lay eggs. These creatures are also reproducing asexually, which is rather amazing. And how is the question. We know how, but what's the motivation, or why does the body do that? That's a question that's being debated. And how does this help them other ways? We're noting that certain lizards, certain snakes have healthier bodies, healthier activities. They're faster, they're stronger when they operate certain ways. In other words, what's the best way? What's the best strategy for your situation? Are you a burrower? Are you a tree climber? Are you a swimmer? All interesting. Recently, what's happened is you'll find in the literature many things describing parthenogenesis, and then there'll be a comment, well, this doesn't happen with this. You read a little further and go, oh, there's a reference to that. You check the reference. New development, yes, these creatures reproduce asexually as well. So I just found that out with a couple of elapids, which are the members of the nerve venom snake family, such as cobras. But in Australia, in this case, it was a death adder, and it was a coastal taipan, which is a highly venomous snake that you don't want to be envenomated by. I do know that one of the television companies had a man in Australia who was bitten by one. He didn't last the day, so they had to cancel that program and start over. So people do and can get hurt by some of these things that typically wouldn't even normally bite, but you never know. It's all unpredictable. So next, the value of these animals. Asexual reproduction seems to be far more common in the invertebrates. So insects, for example. I did mention, though, that domestic turkeys can be parthenogenic, which is incredibly amazing. Here we have a spotted salamander larva, and it is being taken out by an invertebrate, a small water bug or beetle. And that kind of typifies the value of the interaction of our life histories of different creatures. And so often we have a lot of ignorance, and we have people who are afraid of things, don't understand them, and would like to kill or get rid of virtually everything they don't like or understand. And if we did that, we wouldn't have very many creatures. We wouldn't have wild places, because we certainly wouldn't have grizzly bears. We certainly wouldn't have sharks. We certainly wouldn't. And sharks are one of mine, bull sharks, especially in murky water. That's nerve-wracking. But I would say that the more we understand these things, the easier they are to appreciate, and the more likely that we'll be able to have them in the future to maintain our wild core areas. And natural systems are something that can easily be destroyed, and that's not very respectful, especially with all kinds of components and items that would actually benefit us, whether it's natural plants or whether it's reptiles and amphibians or whether it's birds or bugs. Many of these things are critical to our well-being, including bees, for example. You're looking at, most people probably just don't care for dandelions, yet that's one of the baseline flowers that you would want to have when bees come out of hibernation to reestablish themselves for the work that they have ahead of them with pollination, etc. So asexuality is pretty amazing and important, I think, to a lot of populations that may come under fire in the future just because of our greed or our inability to understand and comprehend how important they are. So it kind of all ties together in a great big giant fireball. Not really, but that was fun to say. I think also when you think about a lot of these unusual creatures, they can hurt us. For example, I was laughing the other night because a friend posted an assassin bug. And I've got a buddy of mine, Al Sheldon, who's a herpetologist, and we've traveled the country together. One day we were in Kansas. He flipped a rock, and I didn't see him. I heard him screaming. I'm not going to repeat some of his language, but he was extremely under duress, totally shocked out of his gourd and amazed. And I came running down, and a friend of mine, Rachel, was with me, and we came down the valley, and I was like, Al, what's going on? What's up? And he said, don't handle these things. Well, what is it? It's an assassin bee. It's an assassin bug. I thought it was an assassin beetle, but it's not. It's the bug. And the bugs bite, and it's like worse than a bumblebee sting. And so he got a full blast from this thing, totally unexpected. So it was quite a surprise. I understand these water beetles or water bugs can bite quite badly as well. So, we do have to be careful. Poisons, incidentally, are ingested. Venoms are injected, and we can get that from obviously spiders and snakes, but scorpions are another. And so be safe out there. Barnaby, would you care to interject? I haven't heard a word.
I'm just enjoying, man. You have given so much information here. And I feel like the whole comments section just kind of slowed way down over here.
Oh, really?
And I'm wondering, like, there's a lot of really interesting points there, and so fastly covered and everything that I want to open up here as
Sure.
Especially to anyone who has any questions that has been listening in that. And I want to kind of focus in on some main details. And I think this is a good time to play my new video here that we're supposed to, if you guys are interested in the comments section, to use super chats. So let's take a look at that.
Show your support for the Untold Radio Network family of shows and join in on the conversation by using super stickers and super chats on YouTube. Got a question you want answered? Ask it live via a super chat and get real-time responses from our show's knowledgeable hosts and guests. Help keep the Untold Radio Network shows running strong. We need your support. Send your super chats and stickers now.
Now, obviously, you guys don't have to, spend money to leave a comment, but this is something for the shows where we have a lot of comments and that whole section is just flying, and it's a good way to get your comments recognized on the air and get your questions through. So if anybody has any questions for Dan about anything that we've discussed here or Dan's discussed and talked about, or any Bigfoot too as well, please throw them in the comments section there, and we'll get to them. So what you have so much stuff here. I like the part turkeys can read what's a
asexually reproduce.
Asexual reproduce. Sorry, we'll stick with that.
Genesis, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So now they're actually finding it in other
vertebrates.
Like birds and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Is there been any other documentation in any other species of birds?
I focused on reptiles and amphibians, and I was surprised to see the birds. And
Okay.
And I wished I would have covered regeneration a little better because like I mentioned, I'm not a cytologist. I haven't taken apart the cell situation and said big hairy words like meiosis or any of that. And but it's just interesting how these haploid diploid creatures function, and who knows what we're going to find. It takes time and money to explore this. My time is pretty much Sasquatch related, and I'm a wildlife photographer, so I'm working on that. And then I'll be doing more nature and wildlife presentations as I go, and more video work. I haven't even started the video work yet. So I'm working on that equipment. I've got a thermal coming to me from a friend of mine, so I'll be working at night some. And then the travel. I'm going out to see Washington, quite a few people, and meet my new podcast partner, Angelique Benham, and then also Ricky Idlet, who is the head engineer for the boat, the American Queen. We're going to be running Sasquatch podcasts from there, as I plan to be employed with them eventually. So wish me well on my interview coming up this week. So,
Awesome. Good luck, man.
yeah,
So much cool
thanks.
stuff going on.
And once that happens, I'll be living in the weight room and living on computer and jiving from Minneapolis all the way down to New Orleans and then east on the Mississippi or Ohio River, going all the way up to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So Mississippi and Tennessee and all that good stuff. So quite excited about that.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you think that, like back to the turkey thing, do you think that has to do with, like we're finding out more and more that, as you said in the beginning, that dinosaurs are more related to birds and reptiles at the same time? Do you think that has to do with the reproduction there?
It could very well. Who knows what's going on in the latent genetics of these things? In other words, we often talk about, for example, Alex Evans is a good friend of mine. She does incredible lifelike illustrations of Sasquatches. And another artist everyone's familiar with is Sibylla Christine Irwin. And she does incredible as well. These two women ask the right questions. And I'm trying to model my work after them because they know how to draw those details out and bring in the information, eye width, and were their eyebrows? How deep was that brow? How big were those cheekbones? What was the nostrils like? What was the nose like? How close were you? How was the daylight? How was there light? All those things. Did it make funny noises? What kind? And what kind of facial expressions did it wear? How did it change those facial expressions? Well, those are the types of details that we need to enact with our studies, regardless of what we're doing, because so much is left behind, whether we're working with reptiles and amphibians or prodding into the past with dinosaur questions or now here we have a bird that is asexually capable. What else is asexually capable? We have no idea about. So far in reptiles and amphibians, we don't have anything with crocs. We don't have anything with turtles, but the other guys we do, including the Sicilians, which are slender, blind-type, snaky-looking amphibian scaleless things of the tropics or near tropics. There's also the case of regeneration. Lizards do it, salamanders do it, snakes do not do it. Turtles seem to do it with their shells because their healing process is just amazing. And then also we have alligators and crocodilians, which can regenerate part of that tail. And I was trying to get a good fix on regeneration. What's going really on there? It's basically an explosion of cells, and it's an extension of the spinal cord into the tail, which is crazy. And then you get cartilage. It's like a big cartilage tube. And then that shoots out, and then it eventually ossifies, and then you have your tail on lizards. I haven't studied the regeneration of the limbs and the digits on salamanders yet, but you've got me going on that now. So,
very cool. What was I going to say? And the other thing that you spoke on too, as well as the sperm detention.
Yes,
where they can actually mate and then not have those eggs.
Yes, we've had indigo snakes, which is the largest snake in North America, at least lengthwise, 8 feet, about 8 feet 5, I think. Some people think certain snakes have reached 9 feet, but I want to say right now, there's questions about the accuracy in the measurements, especially with people that are maybe not particularly familiar with the animal. And then number 2, snakes are like bass. You measure them, they shrink. So I've been called out to see 6 foot and 7 foot snakes and 8 and 9 footers, and they're like 4 or 5 or 6 feet long. So it's just been a laugh a minute, and of course online it's typical of misinformation left and right, whether it's crocodilians, snakes, reptiles, amphibians, Sasquatches, or whatever. People do not measure things very well or guess distances very well. Thomas Steenberg had a great example of like 3 sets of people watching a Sasquatch from a distance, and they all guesstimated how far away it was and approximate height and all those things. Every person gave a completely different answer. So what do you go with? So
that's like Cliff Barrickman says, humans are very poor at observations.
Well, generally, especially when we're excited or there's low light or it's distant, I try to equate a football field with a 50-yard line and then take it from there. But that's hard too, really. So then it becomes, how many vehicles? Well, what kind of vehicle? Was it my 19-foot F250 long bed, or was it your squat little tiny Honda? I mean, it just goes on and on. So, but it's wonderful to work with everybody and have such a good time to learn so many things. Sometimes we learn things we don't want to learn, maybe, but it's great to network and have, now we can talk to somebody who actually saw this, or there was a footprint, or there was a carcass with a particular predator mark, So it just goes on. And the deeper you get into this, regardless of the subject, the more you learn and the more it actually makes sense. Whereas we have a lot of people sitting at the table going, show me, that's not anything, But you go out there and see some things that don't match, and all of a sudden, there's heebie-jeebies, but there's also significant vocalizations that'll go right through you. And if it sounds like an elephant and it's got a scream on it, chances are it's not an elephant.
I would like you to, if possible here, do some just hypothetical and see what we can come up with real quick on. Sure. We're talking about the asexual reproduction of these creatures. Mm-hmm. And how would you think that would apply to two different characteristics here, or two different categories? The lake monsters and plesiosaurs and stuff like that of the ancient, dinosauria and stuff.
Sure.
And then the flying pterosaurs, because I know, like we were talking about different reptiles having different things. What are you looking at for? Do you think it's possible for the plesiosaurs to reproduce that way, and then also the flying pterosaurs? I
would say that first of all, we don't know what we're dealing with the giant air birds. I'm taking reports myself and know some people that claim to have seen some pretty amazing things. And they may well have, especially with all the extreme claims that we have with things that just don't seem to make sense. Or are they of this world? Are they not? Who knows? Getting back to the Loch Ness monster, potential plesiosaurs, or similar, I'm hoping that the labyrinth to the sea is possible. I like the idea of the escape routes and using that as an internal place to possibly lay eggs. Is it possible that these things could be asexual? Sure. Why not? If Komodo dragons are, why not? Why the heck not? And the more we learn about the mechanisms of the physiology of it, and also probably body capability. We all know somebody who surprised a doctor. In other words, our human bodies have done amazing, and we don't regenerate much. We can regenerate like our fingernail. We can regenerate maybe our fingernail tips, but we have a heck of a time maybe a little bit on our livers. But I mean, it takes a major amount of dedication and effect to change our bodies. I'm going through that now. I was 267 pounds last year, and now I ended up at 225. I'm heading for about 198 here shortly, hopefully. And I like to eat like an offensive or defensive lineman. In other words, way more than I should. And some days I just feel like doing that. But I'm trying to learn to eat normally, and it is hard, especially if I'm, people get bored and they get hungry, or they overdrink, or et cetera, et cetera. So, but people are surprising our doctors, and still in this age, we're learning more and more about the capability of what we can do, or at least some can do. And that may well be some of the surprises that lie ahead in the future discoveries we make of, everything from bringing back past species through the laboratory, or discovering present day live ones. There's an awful lot of territory of this earth, and we don't know everything, that's for sure. I'd like to know a little bit more about what the government knows with its free shall we say, the assets that it can maintain to go out and search at whatever level it decides to. And so I think there's some amazing discoveries that will eventually be shared. Look at what we're doing right now with the internet and some of the online technology and capability. Who would have ever guessed? So just honored and thankful to be part of it. So.
Definitely. Yeah, you talk about like the research goes where the money is and stuff. And, we're talking about the regeneration and stuff. Obviously, you can see a lot of aspects in, well, even asexual reproduction in, the farming industry and that of being able to reproduce that way. And then, with the regeneration properties of these animals in humans, in medical aspects of that. So that's why we're getting the information and why we're actually studying this and not other things.
Agreed. Actually, the implications of cellular work on helping to fix damaged bodies is shockingly amazing and possible. And if it's done correctly and humanely, that can really be something that we can look forward to in the future. So medical, as many problems as we have medically from the standpoint of society or our current system of operation, the chance for improvement and miraculous discoveries is there. And so, I'd much rather be treated nowadays the way they operate on people than in 1812 or 1912
Cut it off.
or 1959, So
I got a splinter. Just cut the finger off. Lose the hole.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's never going to heal. Don't worry about it.
No. Here's some crutches. Here's a Band-Aid.
Yep.
So, yes, exactly.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Right.
How much time do we have, sir?
We're just about out here. We are at the end of the show. Yeah.
I'll quit yakking and let you run the show then.
I want you to. I know I'm a member of your online Facebook group as well with the reptiles and stuff, and that's why I know a lot about like what you've been working on and that. So remind everybody where exactly can they find information on that, and then your Sasquatch stuff as well.
Just Google up, hit reptiles and amphibians in North America. It's ID and natural history, and a friend of mine's dad, who's now a friend, is giving me a good kick, and we went from Midwest localities to the entire North American continent, including Mexico, which we're working on. So I'll be working with all the universities in Mexico, in every state, from Sonora to Coahuila to Veracruz to Mexico to Sinaloa, and I'll be working primate work too. So I'd like to find some more information on mystery folklore and how about current tracks. And then with the Sasquatch work or the Wildman work, we've got Wildman literature with all the current authors. As the books come out, we try to get them in there. So, and Daniel Perez is doing a fantastic job of coordinating his efforts there as well. And most of the authors of these books are members, so you can actually have a one-on-one with the author, perhaps, if they're willing. Another that I have is Art and Data. I'll be continue to work with Sibylla and Alex Evans on the work that they do and other artists as well. Satan Fudge is a good example of somebody who's done incredible with the Photoshop type work. And we see a lot of this A1 now, but we'd like to see it used properly rather than faking us out with extreme claims that are, very much in question. Another is the White Biped Project. And basically, I'm trying to collect Sasquatch reports and other upright bipeds, whatever they may be, with snouts or not snouts. And some people refer to them as canine, and they may be baboon, they may be any number of, giant hyena, who knows? But all the things that masquerade as something called a dog man that might not be Sasquatch, I'm interested in, especially if we can get white color phases and things like that. If we could place these and get an idea of what type of percentages of the population have that color, that'd be pretty amazing. I also have a Dogman Mystery Group. That was originally to pick up more Sasquatch reports because I didn't believe in such a thing. I've since changed my mind some. I don't know what we're dealing with, but I do have descriptions and a lot of anecdotal information, very few tracks that I hold much water with, but there are some. And a lot of unknown, a lot of work to do there. So major mystery around us and a lot of fun, and you know all about it. So thank you so much, Barnaby.
Absolutely,
Always,
man. That sounds great.
always a pleasure to work with you, and looking forward to the next field time we can get together in.
Oh, definitely. Let me know, man. I love to
Yeah.
hang out with you more.
Oh, definitely.
You got so much stuff going on. I appreciate all your work. I didn't know that you were so into Dogman, though. That's good to know.
Not as much as it might sound, but
Yeah.
I have to, because I have close associates that tell me that I need to know about what they saw. And
Yeah.
when somebody you trust deeply shares that information, you're kind of left standing going there, who am I to judge this? And especially we know with we don't have all the, if this was easy, we wouldn't be doing it. And if it was a simple natural history moment, we wouldn't be doing it, because I do believe our technology would have caught up by now. Yet we're where we are, either from the socio-political aspect of it or the, you tell me, we've got a long way to go. And I'm just keeping it a good time and enjoying all the personalities that I meet along the road. And any way I can help people, I try to do that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
You mentioned before we went on air, you're going to be at a couple conferences speaking and stuff. You want to promote any of that?
Sure. I was asked by Josh Turner to be down in Texas, 1, 2, 3 in September. I'll be at B Mills Hocking Hills Festival vendoring, and also a backup speaker if she needs me. She's got that pretty well lined up, though. And then, let's see, I'm at, we're going to have an outing with the Missouri Bigfoot Conference. That's the 16th and 17th, I think, in Missouri. And that information should be online, and people should be able to Google it up. If you want to get a hold of me, I'll be glad to share that when I get it laid out. 21 and 22, I'm supposed to be at the Blue Zip Line with Shelley Alton, and she's got me on a reptile demo and doing a Sasquatch talk there, probably vendoring too. And then Randy Hutchings in the middle of Tennessee, in the middle of October. So. And I'll put up a speaker list, etc., as I get this laid out. Next week, I'm going to be in Meadowland Falls. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. Hooking up with my podcast partner, Angelique Benham. So she is an amazing woman who's had some experiences, and really looking forward to learn a lot from her. So thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. All right, man. Looks like we have a lot more to talk about and a lot more that you can cover. So I hope that I get to have you back again as a guest.
Sure.
And we can go over a whole bunch more stuff, because you are a wealth of knowledge, sir. And I appreciate your time and all of it that you bring to the table.
Well, back at you. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that you share and do what you do. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'll be looking to learn a lot from you as well, Barnaby. So thanks.
Well, thank you, man. All right. Thanks for being on today.
Okay. Gotcha. Bye.
All right, guys, check that out. If you guys have any questions for Dan, he's online. He's got his Facebook groups and all kinds of information for you. So make sure you head on over there and check that out. There's all kinds of stuff with reptiles and Bigfoot and everything. So quick reminder, guys, again, this weekend, the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention. If you guys want to come out June 10th in Marinette, Wisconsin, tickets are available at the door. And you can also get tickets for Angela Zabel's gallery reading that night. Christopher Noel, Chad Lewis, and myself will be there along with Angela Zabel. So that is sponsored by Paraflix, Paralinked, Ravenwood Gardens, Caps, and American Ghost Walks. Head on over to that. And with that, that is our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Coming up next week, we have Jack Chavez coming on the show. He's going to be talking about the rake and pale crawlers, as well as their connection to possibly being Wendigo creatures. So look forward to that if you're interested in that stuff. So until then, I'll see you on the edge.